Joining me now is Charlie Hurt and Griff Jenkins, both of whom are co-hosts of Fox and Friends Weekend. And in the middle is the lovely Caroline Downey, National Review columnist. To one and all, thank you so much for this. Is a great A-team. I love it. All right. Charlie, I look at Kamala. First of all, I look at Sharpton. I mean, and you were saying he seems practically reasonable compared to where the Democrats are right now. But I just wonder, are American voters really dumb enough to take some of this stuff seriously, what we're hearing coming out of these people, particularly now that we see what Gavin Newsom was really up to with all the fraud scandals, et cetera, and Mamdani failing in New York City?
Yeah, you would really hope so. And obviously across the country, you know, our voters, I think, are a lot smarter than you in a place like New York City, where you wind up with these insane results. But, you know, one thing I think it's going to be really interesting to watch over the next 4 years is the fact that there have been two people who have unified the Democrat Party over the past decade and a half, Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And Barack Obama did it by bringing people together. Donald Trump has done it by creating this situation where these people have this blind hatred. It doesn't matter what he could support, like puppies, and the Democrat Party would come out against puppies. And what happens, though, once he is no longer on the ticket, once he's gone, it's going to be really, really interesting. And my hunch is that the party splinters, because the party has no unifying, cohesive thing. That all their hatred of Donald Trump has meant that they shut down the government in order to abolish ICE.
During a war.
During a war, to shut down the Department of Homeland Security, therefore high taxes, open borders, criminals, and all of these things that they're going to be stuck with. And I know Democrat voters do not support that kind of thing.
Well, Caroline, one of the surprising things about Donald Trump is that he's so surprising. He always surprises. No more so, I think, than when he announced that he can get along with Mamdani. Remember when they met in the Oval Office, and they've been talking apparently since? And Donald Trump came out on the anniversary, the 100-day anniversary of his mayoralship here in New York City. He came out and he said, you got to clean up Manhattan. Clean it up. Make it sparkle, number one. And you got to lower taxes or everyone's leaving. And you got to stop crime by calling in the United States government to let us help. Those three things. First of all, I don't think he's listening, but you look at the list of his 10 tax increases that he wants, which he stupidly, I think, put out, sort of telegraphing what he wanted to do so all the parties against tax increases could get in. I don't know if we can list them there, but top among them is raising the top marginal tax rate 51%. From 3.9% to 5.9%. There's the whole list of it. He claims that's a 2% increase. Not true. There's 2% between 3.9 and 5.9, but that's actually a 51% increase. And then with his inheritance tax, which is directed directly towards the middle class. I mean, to people who bought an apartment or a house 30 years ago for $50,000, $75,000. It's now worth enough to be collected by the government. A middle class doesn't want to give their inheritance money to the government.
No, and I find it hard to believe that Mamdani, while on the campaign trail promising to be Santa Claus to fulfill every demand and whim of the progressive base in New York City, that he didn't know that the city was broke. Now it's in a budget crisis. You're telling me he was unaware of the accounting and that actually all these exorbitant wish lists were never going to be achieved? Albany doesn't want it. Kathy Hochul said no because you're going to run our tax base, which is already dwindling, to the Sun Belt even further. So Mamdani's going to get some buyer's remorse. We're already seeing evidence of that, David, in the streets, because the only thing at his disposal that I'm aware of is to raise property taxes. And to your point about the middle class, it punitively treats everyone in the city, not just the wealthiest, not just the highest income percentages, which obviously his base is fully on board with. Yeah, you know, tax the rich, get them to pay their fair share, even though they already pay the vast majority of taxes in the city and in the country. But all he can do is this property tax thing. As for his relationship with Donald Trump, I've written about this for National Review. This is the horseshoe theory of populism, right? They're both populist, but different flavors. But the key difference between their two different strains is that Mamdani is self-flagellating. He actually hates New York City. Yeah. They claim to have this.
Well, and he hates capitalism.
Yes. Well, that's proof of it.
Yeah.
Is to implement socialism here means to destroy New York City and everything that it is known for and was built on.
And then we have crime, and I want to bring it further than New York because people don't like a centric New York. It's about the whole country, and crime is picking up, particularly among illegal migrants that are here. And there have been several different cases that we can point to where horrible crimes have taken place. And very often the person responsible for it was an illegal migrant who was let in by the Biden administration, let off on temporary protected status, the famous TPS that you've studied in detail.
Listen, let me just talk about the first 100 days of Mamdani, because crime, he was going to defund the police and he was anti-police. He hasn't actually done that.
No.
And when Caroline talks about buyer's remorse, you know, David, I've been given to acronyms this week, and I thought of another one today.
Please.
ZOCO, Zoran always chickens out. There's no free bus rides. He promised that. There's none of the freeze the rent. He said he was going to immediately freeze rent. That didn't happen. Stabilized rent in New York City went up 3% in the last year. You go down the list, and he hasn't delivered on any of it. He simply hasn't done it. And I think the buyer's remorse is, hey, wait a minute. We thought this guy was actually going to do all these crazy things, and yet he hasn't. So it appears that he chickens out.
And then, Charlie, we have the war with Iran, which may or may not end well for Republicans, for Trump in particular. But if it does, and I frankly wouldn't bet against it, you think of everything that Trump has done to defang one of the worst regimes in history in the Middle East, killing hundreds of thousands of their own citizens over the years, killing thousands of Americans over the years, and from the beginning started with a slogan, "Death to America." And Democrats seem to be backing the regime more than they back our own troops.
Well, one of the things that I think is particularly interesting about the war is that usually Congress Washington never does anything in an election year because they're so afraid of paying political consequences. Donald Trump launched this war against Iran, not for political reasons, and he was not afraid of the political fallout. He did it because he believes it's the right thing to do.
Right.
And to me, that is an extraordinary thing. We've never seen that before. The invasion of Iraq happened in 2003. Why did it not happen in 2002? Because it was an election year. And so the fact that Donald Trump is willing to do this because it's the right thing to do sets him far and apart from all the other politicians in Washington. If it does work out, and I pray that it does, I think that it could potentially be extraordinary for Republicans because the economy will take off like we've never seen before. The terror tax
it's
that we have
already held
paid,
up extremely well considering the conditions.
Well. The terror tax that we have paid since 1979 because of the antics of the mullahs in Iran, you take that off of oil prices, and I think you wind up with a game changer we have not seen in 50 years.
What do you think about the effect of the war? By the way, do you think that Trump cares about the midterm elections with regard to the war? I think he feels that his duty is to set this country, set the whole world straight vis-a-vis Iran, and try to get rid of that threat for the entire world, and particularly for Americans, more than he is focused on the midterms. What do you think?
Yeah, he's doing it for our national interest, and some data shows that voters don't really vote based on foreign policy at the end of the day. It's probably just going to be a referendum on the economy, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how this shakes out. Charlie's right, though. This war didn't just start. This has been a half a century long war with all of Iran's proxies waging war against our troops across the Middle East for a very long time. And there are reasonable critiques of the way it's been prosecuted, some miscalculations in my opinion. The Europeans did not rush to our defense in the Strait of Hormuz.
They still haven't.
They still haven't. The ceasefire hasn't held. I'm sorry, it hasn't. Like, there's still strikes going on. But all of that is to say, if you are actively rooting for the resurgence of the regime, you are not like a patriotic American.
Right.
Full stop.
Right. The thing that's happening, though, right now is so much is coming out about fraud, about all of the miscues by Democrats. Even here, getting back to New York for a second, I mean, Mamdani didn't start this ridiculous pattern of spending $81,000 for every homeless person staying in a ritzy hotel in Manhattan, when for half that money you could move them to a rural part of the state where they would live quite well. I mean, there are all these legacies of bad spending, too much spending in the wrong place. Of course, it went on steroids during the pandemic, and we're finding out that a lot of that money was terribly misspent, mostly by Democrats.
And you're seeing from Minnesota to California to here in New York, these fraud investigations bearing fruit. And you're right, it's all tied to Democrats. But I would say Vice President Vance, who's now leading this fraud task force, is going to get tangible, hard results. People are actually going to go to jail for committing fraud because they stole American taxpayers' dollars. And that is nonpartisan. It crosses Republican, Democrat. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're giving money to taxes, it's being stolen, people get pissed off. Yeah. And when Vance comes back from going over to Pakistan to try and cut a deal that President Trump, to Charlie's point, no American president in history has compelled the leaders of Iran to come to the table, face an existential threat, and maybe for the first time engage in good faith. And these, by the way, are not the old mullahs that have been in charge. They've been wiped out. If you think of Iran as a Fortune 500 company, the CEO, the CFO, the entire executive team, the manager of HR, they're all gone. Yeah. Now it looks like about the only guy that seems to be stepping up in the void is Mohammad Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament. He has a very tough decision this weekend. Do I actually try and see if I can work a deal and give the U.S., President Trump, what he wants, which is a resolution to the nuclear threat and reopening of the Hormuz Strait, or do I cease to exist?
By the way, Donald Trump chimed in on that today with the New York Post. He said, actually, I guess this was Truth Social. He said the Iranians are better at handling the fake news media and public relations than they are at fighting. I think he's right, because the Democrats are playing right into their hands.
Oh, the number of times we've looked at videos that purportedly were from the war that were AI that Iranian leaders put out on the internet, and you have Democrats falling for it and saying, oh, look at this. And they run off with the story. And it is true. They're very good at manipulation. And I think that is the reason why Trump made the decision that I'm not going to fight with all these stupid proxies all over the world, in Lebanon and around the Middle East. I'm going to go straight for the bad actors.
We're over time, but I got to ask very quickly. It's got to be a quick answer. Who's going to be? You mentioned J.D. Vance. If he does well in Pakistan on this Iranian thing, I mean, that pretty much assures him as a Republican candidate for the next president. But what about Democrats? Does anybody see anybody other than the Kamala Harris, who's already lost, and other people who've already lost or shown themselves to be incompetent, like Newsom? Could there be somebody that we don't see now that, basically we saw it with Bill Clinton? He kind of rose from nowhere in the course of a few months. Is there anybody out there? Could it be a Shapiro or somebody like that?
If they were smart, they would. That's the direction they would go in. But to me, the $60,000 question is, who is in charge of the Democrat Party today? And it is the far left.
Clearly the far left, right?
I say Wes Moore, Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
Okay.
I've gotten to follow him a little closer because I was covering that bridge collapse in Baltimore. He's got the leadership skills, and it's got to be somebody that isn't a part of the past Biden administration. And pretty much everybody on that stage at NAN, except for Wes Moore.
And he's moderate, although, you know, you look at Spanberger, I heard so many people say she was moderate before she got into power, and look where she is now. I mean, every left-wing Looney Tune thing that she can get her hands on, she tries to pass.
The first thing that they did, she inherited a
You're a governor, by the way.
My governor inherited a $2 billion surplus in Virginia. And the first thing that Democrats did is they started taxing people, further overtaxing Virginians, going after people's guns, and now they're rigging the elections.
I could stay and talk for hours, but I got to go.
And she turned it, by the way, back into a sanctuary state.
And most importantly.
That's right. That was pretty bad.
Youngkin's legacy.
Pretty
completely.
bad. And education, there's a whole handful. Folks,
Great
thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And remember, you can catch Charlie and Griff on Fox and Friends Weekend, along with their co-host Rachel Campos Duffy, Saturdays and Sundays, 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time over Fox.